Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. I moved into a new house in a new town in a new state. I'm a recently divorced woman and not used to being on my own after 7 years of marriage. Thankfully, my ex-husband and I didn't have any children, which made the process a little easier. I did my best to put as many miles between us as I could afford. I don't know anyone in town, and my neighbors seemed to be pretty quiet. Nobody even welcomed me to the neighborhood. But perhaps I'm expecting too much from strangers. The house next door to mine appeared vacant from the outside, but I noticed lights on through my kitchen window at night, facing that house. At first, I thought nothing of it. However, on my second day in the house, just as dusk settled in, I heard a knock on my front door. I didn't know who to expect since nobody knew I was here. I opened the door, and to my surprise, it was an old man, perhaps in his late 70s or early 80s, with a friendly smile. Yes. How may I help you? I said, trying to be friendly but clearly confused. I'm sorry to bother you, he said, but I was wondering if you had any sugar I could borrow. I wanted a hot cup of tea before bed, but I neglected to go to the grocery store. I couldn't help but smile at the sheer cuteness of a nice old man borrowing sugar from a neighbor. No bother at all, sir. If you wait right here, I'll go get you a few cups so you won't have to go to the store so soon. The old man's smile widened, and he said, "Thank you." Leaving the door open, I walked past the window, facing his house on my way to the kitchen. I vaguely noticed that his light was on. I opened my cabinet, measured out 2 cups of sugar, and put them in one of the 3 Tupperware bowls I had brought from my last house. I sealed it up and walked back to the front door. But to my surprise, he was gone. I stepped a little further onto the porch, trying to locate him, but there was nothing. No sign of him in his yard. Curiosity got the better of me, so I knocked on his door to see if he still wanted or needed the sugar. However, the lights were off in his house, and nobody answered the door. I walked back to my house, feeling a mix of worry and irritation. Maybe I was frustrated because he was the first smiling face I'd seen in months after my divorce. Being needed for something as small as sugar meant the world to me at that time. Nevertheless, I returned to the kitchen to put the Tupperware bowl in the cabinet, just in case he came back. That's when I noticed something strange. The bag of sugar was put back in the cabinet, and the cabinet was closed. I couldn't understand it. I had left the sugar out in my hurry to get back to the door. Even the little bit that I spilled on the counter was cleaned up. I paused, trying to remember if I had done it before I went back outside, but I couldn't have. The next day, I planned to go to the store. As I was leaving the house, about to get into my car, a lady greeted me. She told me she lived across the street and introduced herself. She asked how I was enjoying the neighborhood so far, and I replied, "I've only met 2 people so far, but you both seem very nice." She thanked me, and then asked about the first person I met. I told her about the older man who lived next door and came to borrow sugar the previous night. Her face turned pale as she stared directly into my eyes for about 2 seconds before asking, "Which neighbor?" I pointed at the house he lived in, and her breathing became labored. She placed her hand on her chest and said, "Nobody lives there anymore. An old man lived there for about 30 years alone. No wife, no kids, just drinking tea in his den." She pointed at the room that faces my kitchen, the one I see lit up every night, and added, "In that room there. He would come ask us for sugar every now and then as well." I interrupted her, panic starting to rise within me. "What do you mean he doesn't live there anymore? He just came to my door last night. That Dean light has been on every night." She replied, slightly confused, "Sweetie, he died 3 months ago." With that, she wished me well and walked away, leaving me in a state of confusion and fear. However, surprisingly, I wasn't as scared as one would expect. In fact, I found myself feeling somewhat happy. A lonely soul needed a lonely soul like me, even after death. I now keep the sugar out in case the friendly old man ever needs it. Story 2. This all started when I moved into my current home. I was about 5 years old and my family didn't have much money, so we could only afford a small house. It was a 2-bedroom house, so my brothers and I had to share a room. The house was cramped, and it always had a foul smell that seemed to linger. My older brothers, aged 8 and 10, wanted bunk beds because they thought it was cool. So they had the bunk bed, and I had my own bed facing our tiny, overcrowded closet. Whenever I was alone in my room, I had this eerie feeling that someone was watching me. But when my brothers were around, that feeling vanished, and everything seemed normal. However, there was one night when my brothers weren't home, and that's when everything changed. As someone who disliked sleeping alone, the idea of being in a dark room by myself always sent shivers down my spine. That night, I eventually fell asleep. But my peace was short-lived. I was abruptly awakened by the slow creaking sound of the tiny closet door. Fear paralyzed me, so I realized I wasn't alone, and I didn't know what to do. I mustered the courage to slowly open my eyes, and that's when I saw it. A tall, lanky figure crouched down in the closet, his presence illuminated by a faint yellow glow in his eyes. His eyes were abnormally large, resembling black holes with a small yellow dot in the center. The man's long, dark hair blended with the pitch black room, almost making him look like a woman at first glance. There was a nightlight plugged in near the closet, a precaution my brother took because he was scared of the dark. To my horror, the eerie figure extended his hand toward the nightlight, never breaking eye contact with me. His hand reached the light, and in that moment, I unleashed a blood-curdling scream that didn't cease until my parents rushed into my room, holding me tightly. As I opened my eyes, the figure had vanished. I sobbed, telling my dad about the man in my closet who wanted to kill me. My dad, armed with one of my brother's toy bats, bravely opened the closet, but there was nothing there. Clothes. The man had disappeared without a trace. In the following nights, I sought refuge in my brother's bed until he kicked me out, forcing me to confront my fear and sleep alone. Those nights were sleepless as I remained on high alert. Concerned about my well-being, my parents decided to send me to therapy. I met with a middle-aged woman who had a thick accent, making it challenging to understand her at times. However, I grew accustomed to her way of speaking. During our final session together, she imparted a lesson I would never forget. If you don't confront your problems, they will only grow bigger until it becomes too much for you to handle. That night, I made up my mind. I would confront this mysterious entity. I kicked my brothers out of our room, sending them to sleep on the couch. Armed with a flashlight, I sat on my bed in complete darkness, eagerly waiting for the slightest noise. And then I heard it, the slow creaking of the closet door, accompanied by the 2 familiar yellow dots. Swiftly, I switched on my flashlight, and there it was. The repulsive, demonic creature that hid within my closet, only revealing itself when we were alone. It remained crouched, with long, skinny arms and huddled legs that allowed it to fit inside the confined space. Its head, long and featureless, had eyes too large for its face. Though it lacked a mouth or a nose, it emitted a sound akin to quiet sobbing. Strangely, I felt a pang of sympathy as I approached it cautiously. Never breaking eye contact, I spoke. Go away. You're not wanted here. The creature slowly crawled out of the closet, tears streaming from its immense eyes, its sorrowful sounds piercing the silence. It stood up, its towering figure leaning slightly to fit within the room. Terrified, I expected it to harm me, but instead it simply vanished. I was left bewildered, unsure if I had banished it or if it had temporarily retreated. However, I soon discovered that when I was alone, I no longer felt its unsettling presence watching over me. Relief washed over me, as if I were reborn, a braver, stronger person. To this day, I can vividly recall the intricate details on its skin, the cuts scattered across its body, the way it looked down at me, and the unsettling feeling of sharing a room with such a creature. I named it Amun, though I can't recall why that name popped into my head as a child. This secret remained mine alone, untold to anyone until now. Story 3. I've always had this fear of elevators. I'm not claustrophobic. It's not the small space that scares me. My fear is simply being locked in by something beyond my control. I live on the 5th floor of an apartment building, and believe me when I say that my phobia has a daily impact on my life. Going up and down those stairs is tiring, and my friend caught the bad end of that last week. I had slept in again, something I do all too often. I heard a ringing beginning in my dream, and as I opened my eyes and drifted back to reality, I realized the sound was coming from my phone. It was Maria. As I answered the phone with weak hands, I tried to mumble a hello, but nothing came out. Hey, I'm in town if you want to meet me. I did want to, but I did not have the energy to go down 105 steps. Yes, I have counted. When you walk them every day, you count them at least one time. My silence spoke for me as she replied, "Please don't tell me you're sleeping at Tomb again." Slightly unfair assessment. It was 1:45 m. I found my voice again. "Hey, sorry. Yeah, I kinda was. Can we meet later? I can't be bothered for the stairs right now. I'm literally finished in town and was about to head home. It's now or never. Please." I couldn't say no to her when she says it like that. She has a specific tone of saying please that she just knows always works on me. I still had that sense of nothing quite feeling real. So I sat up and tried to wake myself a little. Fine. Where are you?" "Downstairs." I chatted on the phone for a few minutes whilst I got ready. We hadn't seen each other for a few weeks, with both of us being busy with university work. So I was actually quite excited. Once ready, I stepped out into the hallway and began my usual routine, making my way to the stairs. I passed the elevators. I do this so often, I don't even think about how much time and energy they could save me. Yet this time, something strange happened. The familiar rumbling of the elevator echoed through the walls as it arrived at my floor. The door opened, spilling the artificial light into the depressingly dim hallway. The gentle, ominous sound of the elevator speaker allowed grainy music to enter an otherwise quiet atmosphere. I could almost make out the song. I don't know if it was my tiredness or having my friend right at the bottom, but I felt like it was time to face my phobia head. I think I might. Try the elevator. Wait. Really? Oh my God. I'm so proud of you. I stepped into the metal box, doubting myself with every step, even as my hand reached for G, confirming my destination for the ground floor. I was fighting myself to not run right back out. The doors seemed to close slower than they opened, giving me ample time to change my decision. I stayed. With the doors sealed, so was my fate. I knew I could no longer turn back. Just a warning. The signal might... Out if. So, Maria? Hello? The call had ended. I had forgotten that elevators often do that. Not only do they wish to trap you from the outside world physically, but also mentally. I had no way of communicating with Maria, and was left with my own thoughts, all of which were negative. I tried to fight the feeling of dread, trying to not even acknowledge the fact that I was in an elevator. It must have been about a minute, in that I realized something was wrong. Elevators were not supposed to take this long. The number above the door indicated that I was still on the 4th floor, but I could feel the elevator moving. Or was that just my anxiety making everything spin? I pressed G again. I don't know how many times I pressed it before switching to the open doors button. Neither seemed to do anything to help my shaky breathing from speeding up. It felt as though the air I was breathing was giving me no oxygen at all. suffocating on nothing. I pressed the emergency button, waiting for a response. For a brief moment, as a man's voice interrupted the music, I felt myself feel more grounded with the earth. "Hello, is everything okay?" Despite my panic subsiding, I spoke too fast for him to understand me. "What?" I tried again. "I think the elevator is broken. It's not moving." A few seconds passed, a few seconds longer than I'd like before someone responds to something like that. But I kept taking deep breaths, knowing that he was probably sending somebody out to fix it. The next sound from the speaker broke me. It's too late. The music came back to life, unaware of the terror within me. A cheery, happy melody, failing to make me feel anything similar. I pressed every button I could. I tried to call, text, and video chat with Maria. Every action I took felt slow, although I'm sure all of this happened within the span of 10 seconds. At the end of it, I collapsed to the metal ground. I looked up at the number. 3. We had gone down a floor. That was good, I thought, until I felt everything stop. I didn't even realize it was moving until it had stopped. The change in velocity was noticeable. I would have felt relieved if it weren't for the fact that the third floor of this building doesn't exist. At least if it does, then I'm not sure how to access it. The elevator has no 3 button, and there are no doors to exit the stairwell on the 3rd floor. Even on the exterior of the building, there is a tall blank space on the wall between the windows of the 2nd and 4th floors. The doors opened, though they did not free me. They only made my prison larger. Darkness seemed to spill in from the large, empty room that the elevator had landed on. I stood up, noticing the damp, dusty feeling of the air. I couldn't see the walls of the room, but I could make out the outline of someone at the edge of the darkness. Right where the light met the dark, something was there. I only noticed that the music had stopped when the man on the elevator's helpline spoke again. I could make out his words between the static and crackles. Perhaps some fears are rational. The longer I stared at the silhouette, the more I seemed to see. It wasn't motionless. It seemed to move slightly up and down. I would say it was breathing if the pattern was more regular. This was more like a grotesque quaking. A dripping sound began as a puddle of liquid emerged from the darkness. Perhaps some fears are... The power went out, and as the lights flickered away, the gentle crackle of the speakers vanished. I could hear only my breathing and the dripping. I did not know whether this thing was in front of me or far away from me. I listened as carefully as I could, listening for any kind of footsteps. But the dripping was so irregular that it was impossible to ignore it and let it blend into the background. The darkness seemed thick, like I could cut right through it. If I had a knife on me, I'd probably have tried. At least I'd be protecting myself in the process. I didn't know what to expect. Every small movement I made felt like it could be my last. I heard a whirring, and the doors close. I had never felt so relieved to be locked in by something beyond my control. The elevator descended again, and I had a moment to reflect on what had just happened. The lights of the elevator remained off, but the red glow from the display above the door remained. I watched as the numbers blinked from 2 to 1 to G. I was waiting for the doors to open and to be met with the familiar, beaming face of Maria. As light from the lobby poured into the elevator, I saw that the lobby was empty, and as my phone reconnected to the network, it got multiple notifications at once. "You're taking a while. Is everything okay? Hello? Is everything okay? I'm gonna come upstairs and find you." My hands still shaking, tried their best to type out a reply. "Don't take the elevator." As the message failed to send, my dread was all but confirmed. I ran out of still pitch, black elevator through the lobby, and sprinted up the stairs. "Maria," I called out to her up the stairwell, although even if she called back, I probably wouldn't have heard her over my panic. "Maria." I kept calling out until I reached the 3rd floor. The blank wall of this floor meant something new to me. Once simply a wall with no door was now a barrier, keeping something at bay. Slowly, but as fast as my anxiety would allow, I placed a finger on the wall, then my palm, then my palm. then my ear. I gently tapped on the wall, and it seemed to echo louder than a normal wall should. I stayed as silent as possible, not even entirely sure what I was listening for. My own heartbeat seemed to grow louder and louder, thumping right through my entire body. My own fingertips moved slightly with every beat as I stayed silent, waiting. Like the creature on the other side, waiting. I almost fell backwards as a loud bang echoed. Turning around, I saw that it came from behind me. It was Maria. Oh my God. You look so stressed. It's okay if you couldn't take the elevator in the end. I did take it. I wish I didn't. I briefly explained what I saw. Trying to make it sound like reality was difficult. It felt like I was lying to her when I was simply explaining the very events I just witnessed. I think she would have laughed if I didn't have tears streaming down my face. She hugged me tightly as I let my head sink into her shoulder. Muffled through my crying, I was able to get out. I thought you were dead. I stayed at Maria's house that night and the whole week. To my surprise, she seemed to believe everything I had told her. She wanted to help me find the truth. She always has been a good friend. I'm truly honored to have someone like her in my life. The first thing we found was an image of the building's exterior from 2008. Windows on the 3rd floor. Some open, some closed, many with plants visible, or clothes hanging out to dry. People lived there some time ago. The next image we could find was from 2015. The windows were gone. In those 7 years, something happened. The question is simply a matter of what. A local news article from 2012 seemed to hold some answers. 15 residents left furious as they are evicted from their homes. It spoke about the apartment building and how a leak on the 3rd floor kept coming back. Residents described it as a deep, black, gooey liquid, dripping with an inconsistent rhythm. An awful lot like what I had seen. The eviction was temporary at first, whilst the leak was investigated, but it seemed to slowly transition to something permanent. What piqued my interest is that they specified we were able to catch up with 14 of those affected. So where's the missing one? After reading through the names of everyone they caught up with, and investigating public documents, I found only one resident's name that didn't appear in the article. Dr. Victor Moros. He was reported missing shortly after the article was published. He had a PhD in psychology, specifically specializing in phobias. I managed to track down a relative of Victor. Their most recent address is the small English countryside town of Sonder. I want to talk to them, but I don't want to be disrespectful. They'll just think I'm crazy. I did visit the apartment lobby yesterday, just to check in on everything. The elevators were out of order. Not that I needed a sign to stop me using them again anyway. All of this seems to link together somehow. I just know it.